Welcome back to Yaya and Mimi on the AT. So our second section of the Appalachian Trail was between Cooper's Gap and Tesnatee Gap. I hope I'm saying that right, but it was about a 25-mile section. It was like 25.1. And after we had gotten a taste of slack packing on our last weekend, we wanted to try that again, especially because this section included Blood Mountain, and we had heard a lot of crazy things about Blood Mountain and how hard it was, and we were still super new, and so we were a little bit nervous about carrying our 25 to 35 pound packs up Blood Mountain. And so we studied the Appalachian Trail Guide and concocted a plan to be able to slack pack all 3 days on the trail. And so we again went with 8 people, and this time it was a different 8 people. And we had 4 vehicles, and so we staged them along the way and created a scenario where we were able to meet a vehicle each night that had all of our gear, and we were able to camp at those locations, and then that enabled us to slack pack the rest of those days. So what we did is Amber and Martin, they came up and we followed each other to Cooper's Gap, and we left his ProMaster van at Cooper's Gap, and then they got into our van with us, and then we drove to Woody Gap, and we met Lori, and this time instead of bringing her daughter Kira, she brought her husband Phil, and she also brought 2 friends. Their names were Morel and Andrea, and they had not ever backpacked before either, so that was another reason why we wanted to slack pack. We met them at Woody Gap, and we left Lori's van at Woody Gap, and we put all of our equipment, like our tents and our extra food and clothing, and basically our big backpacks full of all of our gear, and we left it in her van at Woody Gap. And then we drove down to Dahlonega. We stayed at the Holiday Inn Express in Dahlonega Wednesday night, and then my friend Julie also met us that night at the hotel, so that brought our numbers to 9. And so we woke up bright and early the next morning, and at that point we had 2 vehicles. We had Julie's vehicle and my vehicle, and we had left Lori's vehicle at Woody's Gap and Amber's vehicle at Cooper's Gap. And so we all drove to Byron Reese. And so we started at Byron Reese for this section because one of the shuttle drivers told us that that parking lot gets really full on the weekend, and it's first come, first serve, and it can fill up really fast. And that part of the trail is very popular because it includes Blood Mountain. And so if at all possible, he told us to hike that section on a weekday. And we started on the trail about 7 o'clock that morning, and the parking lot was getting full really fast, even on a Thursday morning at 7 o'clock. And the reason we started at Byron Reese and not Neal's Gap is because Neal's Gap does not allow overnight parking right there at the Mountain Crossing store. And so you can't leave your car there overnight, but you can leave your car overnight at Byron Reese. The trail at Byron Reese, when you're headed towards Blood Mountain, is like straight uphill. It was a great way to start the morning, and it rained on us the whole time. So as we started to approach Blood Mountain, which was a beautiful climb, it was definitely a workout for us. The higher we got in elevation, we started to kind of hike up into the clouds. And so a lot of people were coming down the hill and they were complaining, and they're like, oh, it's a total whiteout up there. But I actually thought it was kind of magical. It was kind of cool. It felt like we were like hiking through the clouds to get up there. And so the clouds were like swirling around us, and I thought it was really amazing. There was the old historical shelter there, and we got to explore that for a little while. There's a really cool big rock beside that shelter, and a few of us climbed up on top of that for some pictures, and we got to explore the inside of the shelter, and it was really cool. Even though it was very cloudy and you couldn't see the view from there because it was still pretty early in the morning, I thought it was quite spectacular. Two more of the climbs that we did that day were Big Cedar Mountain and Preaching Rock, and they were amazing. So the views were really beautiful. We were able to stop, and on the Appalachian Trail guide, it shows like this little picture of a camera, and you'll know when there's going to be a view, and both of those were beautiful places to stop and take pictures, and we did, and we enjoyed it. We kind of, you know, took our little day packs off and had a little snack and some water, and just really enjoyed being able to be on top of those mountains. Those views were, I think, even better than Blood Mountain, even though Blood Mountain was really cool walking through the clouds. So that section of trail offers a lot of really cool views for sure. So we arrived at Woody Gap in the late afternoon. It was around 4:30, and when we had been there the day before, leaving Lori's car there with all of our gear, we had kind of scoped out the area around there to see if there was a place to like camp, and we found such a cool rock quarry, like an old rock quarry wall. If you start hiking up the trail like above the Privy area, there is a beautiful camping spot just kind of tucked away above the Privy area, and there's like this rock wall, and there's like water trickling down it, and it was a great windbreak because the wind started blowing like crazy that day, and so it offered a windbreak for us, and there was an established fire ring, and we were able to claim that site, and it was just probably the best camping site we had seen so far. And I got to do what I love to do. I love the part of the trail where you're able to gather together and sit around a campfire and put your tents up kind of next to each other, and really had that time to socialize and visit and connect with one another, and just be able to just visit with one another. Because on the trail, when you're hiking and you're kind of in single file line, and you're just, it's a workout, and then you get to stop at the views. But at night is my favorite time of the day, when you can sit around the campfire and have some hot tea or hot cocoa and really just connect with each other. We stayed the night at Woody Gap, and during the night, a huge windstorm came through. It sounded like a hurricane coming through, or a tornado or something, but it wasn't. There were just really high winds and really high gusts that night. And we woke up the next morning, and we broke camp, and we went down to the vehicle, and we put all of our gear in there, packed it up, and then we just kept out our cooking stuff, and we had hot cocoa and oatmeal, and we sat at those picnic tables, which are right by the privies and the parking area, and we were able to sit and fuel up for the trail. And then we got back on the trail and headed towards Cooper Gap. We were super proud of ourselves because that was the longest miles we had done so far. So Byron Reese to Woody Gap is like 10.2 miles. Woody Gap to Cooper Gap is 8.4 miles, and we made really good time all day. When we got to Gooch Gap around lunchtime, we stopped to eat lunch and filter water. And so when you get to Gooch Gap, in order to get to the water source, you have to hike down this long hill, and which is fine and dandy going downhill, but then when you're done, you got to come back up the hill. But it was fine. It was a really cute little footbridge down there at the bottom, and it also had this little creek that went across where we filtered our water, and we were all able to kind of sit on some down trees, and we shared jerky and oranges, which is one of my favorite trail lunches. We love the Tillamook old-fashioned jerky. It's one of our favorites. And we had some little clementine oranges, and everyone just shared lunch snacks, and we filtered water, and we helped each other pack our stuff back up. And then we went back up that hill and headed out the trail further. When we made it to Cooper's Gap, that's where we had left Martin's ProMaster vehicle there, and we all climbed in. Martin and I sat in the front, and everybody else piled up on the bench in the back, and we drove back to Woody Gap and picked up Lori's car, and then we followed each other to Tesnatee Gap, which is where we planned to stay for the night. But Tesnatee Gap does not have any camping area around it, and we were super tired, and we had just made the assumption that there would be a camping place there. We didn't read the guide very well, and so the wind started blowing and it started getting really cold, and so we improvised. So we parked like one car here and one car here, and there weren't that many people in that parking lot. I think maybe only one other vehicle, but we parked in a way where we blocked the wind, and we set up camp sort of inside that little triangle that it created. Our hammockers, which were Julie and Morel and Andrea, they went down this little side trail where they went downhill, so it blocked the wind from them a little bit, and the rest of us used the vehicles to block the wind. Amber and Martin pulled out their toilet from their ProMaster, and we set up this like pop tent around it, and we made ourselves a makeshift privy, which was hilarious, and we got some crazy stares and from people that were passing by that were like, what are y'all doing camping in the parking lot? But it was all we had. We just weren't that experienced. And so it actually really ended up being great. There was this one rock that someone had made a fire by previous, and so we built a fire right there, and we were able to stay warm, and we kind of all just huddled together. And then having Martin's ProMaster van there provided us almost like a soup kitchen. We used his little kitchen in there, and we boiled water for our freeze-dried meals and for hot chocolate. And sometimes when it got really windy and cold, we'd actually climb in that van to block the wind. In fact, Amber and Martin did sleep in that van, and then the rest of us either tented or hammocked. And at one point, I think somebody ran to town and got boiled peanuts and came back. So we were just winging it, but it was so much fun. We have a lot of memories there at Tesnatee Gap. So our last day was approximately 6 miles. We went from Tesnatee Gap down to Nils Gap and then over to Byron Reese to pick up our vehicles. So that day we got up and it was like 29, 30 degrees. The wind was blowing so hard. We learned to appreciate our base layer and our puffies, and it was just a really cold morning. And so we had hot chocolate and oatmeal, and then we started our climb uphill. And it was that day that we really made the decision that maybe starting off with a full tummy of hot chocolate and oatmeal might not be the best idea, because I felt like all of our blood rushed to our stomachs to digest, and we just didn't have enough in our muscles, blood flow to our muscles. And so later, after that experience, we decided to just pack up our camp and get on the trail, and then we would drink water and maybe a bar and just kind of eat as we go. And that actually worked out better because we were dragging up that hill. I don't know if it was the cold or just our full stomachs, but we just remember that climb being a tough one. And then 2 beautiful climbs later that day on the way to Nils Gap were Cow Rock Mountain and Leveland Mountain. Were both difficult climbs, but such spectacular views. They were worth every step, and we really enjoyed that. And then we kind of came into Nils Gap, which is right by the mountain crossing store, and they have that tree where everyone's got their hiking boots and shoes hanging in it, and that was kind of cool to see all the trees, the trees with all the shoes hanging in it. And we stopped and got a t-shirt and some souvenirs, and it was a great end to our weekend. So we were so proud of ourselves for putting another 25 miles in on our journey.